Greetings everyone, my name is Atterville, and welcome to the finale of my Let's Play of Super Danny 2. During the last part, I completed Darkman's Castle and obtained the Dark Cross Fusion. So in this episode, I'll be showcasing this fusion's abilities, as well as some new stuff that was unlocked at the end of the Wily Castle. First off, I'll be using Base as a test subject for the fusion. The Dark Cross Fusion is overall the best fusion in the entire game. With this, you walk faster, jump higher, take less damage from every enemy, you don't get knocked back whatsoever upon taking damage, your regular buster shots deal 3 points of damage to most foes, and your charged buster rounds, which you can use immediately by pressing the special key, deal about 6 points of damage to almost every enemy in the entire game. The only downsides with this fusion are that you cannot slide or climb ladders. Plus, your hitbox is bigger. Not to mention, you're still vulnerable to bottomless pits and spikes. Still, I'm going to showcase Dark Fusion a little bit more in this part of Wily 1. Not to mention, the charged buster round still takes some weapon energy to use. You don't have infinite supply, and you can't charge it up manually using the regular buster rounds. I understand why you can't slide in this form, but I don't understand why you can't climb up and down ladders. I mean, we still have arms in this form. Anyways, I'll meet you at the end of the Wily Castle. See you there.
Anything for my sugar.
So that's what happens if you end up defeating Mr. Jet instead of his vehicle. Alright, here I am in Dr. Wily's Castle Stage 5. I noticed something when playing off screen. If you press the awesome key, instead of the usual awesome, in dark form we have this.
Dark code, dark code, dark code.
I'll just damage boost. After all, I take less damage per enemy. Just imagine using Dark Fusion on Fusion mode. Now I'm just gonna destroy all the Roadmasters using this fusion. Something I forgot to mention during Darkman's last encounter is that the Skullbearer can block all of Darkman's projectiles. So if you're playing as Skullman on Fusion mode, you can easily make that boss battle a joke. Also, the boss battle against Dark Base using the Dark Fusion is a lot more fun. You have a lot more movement options, and his damage isn't as crazy. I just wish that the Night Fusion also had a damage reduction. Maybe not as good as the Dark Fusion, but at least some. Some bosses are tougher than others though, like Nightman and Skullman due to their barriers. The ones without barriers are pretty easy to deal with. Flameman can be a little bit of an issue, but not by much. After all, you can jump over most of his attacks now. Remember how difficult Ferroman was originally? Now with my upgraded mobility options, he's a lot easier to deal with. Now on to the Wily Machine. Out of all the fortress bosses I've encountered in this game, the hardest one would easily be Dark Base. He's more difficult than the Wily Capsule as well as Darkman's final encounter. The reason why I say that is because even though they have some damaging attacks, they're a lot more predictable, but Dark Base is a lot more unpredictable and faster. Using the Dark Fusion does make it a bit more fun, as it reduces some of the issues with how much damage he deals to you. And with some practice, Wily Capsule Dark Soul isn't too bad. I believe that all of its projectile attacks are dodgeable, especially if you use the Skull Fusion or Dark Fusion, but even with the basic non-fusion form it's doable. And almost every enemy and boss in the game is weak to the charged Dark Buster, barring certain exceptions like Wily Castle's one boss, aka the Rock Band, as well as the secret boss at the end of the game, which I will go through right after this sequence is over. Oh, by the way, in order to unlock hard mode, you need to complete normal mode using the Dark Fusion. And in order to unlock fusion mode, you need to complete the game on hard mode. Fusion mode grants you infinite usage of every fusion. This final level is a reference to several episodes for the Ruby Spears cartoons. Power Cove from some episode. These enemies from Electric Nightmare, where Dr. Wily takes control of all the electrical appliances in the city. Not only that, but even non-electrical things. A reference to Damage 128. Just check Blyka's website on that. A reference to The Day When the Moon Fell. A reference to Brobots. Sadly, we can't talk with him. Now we're getting attacked by bicycles. A reference to one of the streets in one of the episodes. And the boss of the stage is a hot dog stand. It will insta-gib you in any form, even the Dark Fusion. So, in order to defeat this boss, the strategy is to just jump over it, and it'll ram into the wall and destroy itself. That's what happened in the original episode. And by completing a secret level, we get this extra ending. With all of that done, now this is a good time to give my overall thoughts on this game as a whole, starting off with the positives. The fusions were fun to play around with. The ones that I found to be the most useful were Gyre Fusion thanks to its fight abilities, Skull Fusion thanks to its faster movement speed, ability to slightly angle shots, and a weak shield, as well as the Fairy Fusion thanks to its Mamira form. The Shadow and Crystal Fusions also did have some use for enemies further away and at positions diagonal to the player. And I can't forget how powerful the base non-fusion form is with its fast charging charge shot. The level design, though taking some to heavy inspiration from the original levels, still mixes things up and adds new elements. I like the inclusion of the Mega Man killers, Quint, the Ruby Spears bosses, and Bass. I do also like around half the new attacks added to the bosses, but I'll get more into that during the negatives section. As for stuff that I found to be a bit mediocre, some of the enemy encounters weren't the best. We started with the Big Eyes and Shield Attackers, and some enemy placements in Darkman's castle. The problem with the Big Eyes are that they don't telegraph their tall hops versus their short hops, making it difficult to slide under them, unless you're using a fusion like the Shadow Fusion or Snake Fusion. This was also an issue in the older classic Mega Man titles. This meant that unless you were lucky, super skilled at dodging, or fast at button mashing, you would take some guaranteed damage at certain areas. The issue with the shield attackers isn't their AI or telegraphing, it's some of their placements in the levels. There are more than a few spots in the game where you are expected to react quickly to shield attackers. Due to their relatively quick movement speed relative to Danny, it can be difficult to avoid them unless you know their positions in advance. Some of the fusions didn't get enough time to shine in this title. I found this true with the Flame Fusion, Night Fusion, and especially the Snake Fusion. At least with the Flame and Night Fusions, there were a few scenarios where it'd be handy to use them. Sadly, the Snake Fusion was mostly outclassed by other fusions. Perhaps if the special snake could pierce through multiple enemies at a time. On a similar note, I wish there was more differentiation between the different fusions in terms of mobility. I feel Powered Up did a better job in this regard. For this game, I feel altering the level design to add more scenarios where other fusions would be handy would be the best bet, as I don't find any of the special weapons to be bad per se. Now, onto what I didn't like about this game. The main issues I had with this title are the improper introduction of gimmicks, the lack of telegraphing during boss encounters, and improper difficulty balancing. For example, the game introduced gyro blocks over a bottomless pit, the rock gimmick in Fairyman's level over a pit as well, the rolling wheels over spikes, etc, etc. It really feels like this game is assuming you already encountered these gimmicks before. If that's the case, then I'll drop this complaint. Where my other primary issues lie are that the bosses don't telegraph their moves properly and or they deal too much damage. This becomes an issue with about half the new attacks added to the bosses, Anchor, a few of the Dock Robots, and Dark Base. I wouldn't mind this as much had certain bosses not dealt so much projectile or contact damage or had stricter patterns. See, I enjoyed playing through most of the levels. The balancing, outside of certain enemy placements and gimmick introductions, was fine, yet the bosses was where the game faltered. In the end, I found this game to be okay. I definitely found it better than Powered Up. I had enjoyment throughout the experience, though I wish we had more upgrades that we could collect throughout the levels, like in Powered Up. Nevertheless, if you'd like to try out a fan game where you essentially play as Roadmasters, I'd recommend Day in the Limelight 2 over this one. That game did a superior job of balancing out the game and characters. With all that said and done, thank you all for watching my Let's Play of Super Danny 2, viewers. If you enjoyed my Let's Play, please rate, favorite, comment, and or subscribe, as they all help out the channel. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter as well, as I regularly post updates there. Once again, thanks for watching, and see you in the next Let's Play.